Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. In episode 3 of the Content and Narrative, we'll be looking at this little gem of a book by Neil Gaiman, Stardust. Now, the book was published in 1997 and the film itself was released just 10 years later in 2007. Now, we will be looking at 5 major things, as usual. We are looking at the character representation. We're looking at the setting, for example, the time and the place. We're looking at the plot overall, how well they got the plot of the book onto the screen. Then we're looking at, does the film stand in its own right? And finally, how well the film overall, including everything that we've discussed before, took from the book and put onto the screen. Now, as always, we will start with character representation. Now, there are 9 characters that I'm going to be discussing briefly. Even though there are many characters within the books themselves, obviously I can't discuss every single character that comes across. Otherwise, we will be here for hours, which neither of us want. Now, the first one we'll start off with is Tristan Thorn. Now, he is the protagonist of the book and of the film. In the book, he's about 17 years old. In the film, he's more of a man. You think he's about 20 odd, maybe a little bit longer, younger, a little bit older. Depends on what you think. Now, he is love struck. He's completely love struck with Victoria Forrester, who I will briefly be describing as well. And she's the reason that he ends up over the wall. Now, he is also half human, half fairy. Now, his half human side is his dad, Dunstan Thorn, and his half fairy side is his mum, which is Lady Una of Stormhold. And we find that out right at the end of the book that that's who she is. So he can travel between the two without any consequences. He's always open to new things and he's open to an adventure. In the book, more than one occasion, he's just sort of gone with the flow. As something happens to him, he goes, yep, that's fine. And he's very accepting of a lot of people. In the film, he sees that as well. He just doesn't seem as quick on the adventure as he does in the book. So you do have that. And apart from the age, I think everything else sort of like he's love struck for Victoria, but then he's on her when he meets Yvain and how he deals with that, and the fact that he's willing to basically sacrifice himself for her at one point. It's shown very well on the screen, and you get that sense of him being a hero without meaning to be a hero. He's just a nice guy, right place, right time. So then you've got Yvain. Now, Yvain is the star. She's the one that Victoria Forrester wants as a wedding gift. So for Tristan to be able to propose to Victoria, he needs to bring her the star that fell, the shooting star that she saw. That's Yvain. In the fairy world, she's a human being. So she's very... She always shimmers when she's happy as well. So you can tell in the film, when she's shimmering, you can tell that she's starting to fall in love or she's content. Pardon the pun. So you can tell when she's happy. So she is also a very determined and strong-minded young woman. In the book, it's shown because when you first encounter her, she's crying. But then when Tristan is like, right, I'm bringing you back as a wedding gift, she goes, well, I'm not going to help you in any way. I'm not going to do absolutely anything. I'm literally going to be the most hindrance person I can be in the whole world. And fair play to her, she does it. She does that very well. And then he ends up feeling for her and helping her later on. She also loves everything. She loves everything with everything that she has. So when she loves something, she puts all in. And that's evident later on when the witch tries to cut the heart out of Yvain in the book, and then realizes that the heart doesn't belong to Yvain anymore. She's given it to Tristan. In the film, that's slightly different, but we'll come across that later. So in the film, you do see a good portrayal of who she is. In the book, she's a little bit more quick of tongue, as it were, when she's talking to people. And in the film, she's just a little bit more sarcastic rather than actually just full-on vicious. But you can understand why she's both sarcastic and vicious in both the film and the book. I mean, she has been knocked out of the sky by the Ruby of Stormhold, and she's now on Earth, surrounded by people, and then she gets taken prisoner and is being told that she's going to be a wedding gift to somebody, so you feel for her. Now, the next one we look at is Lamia, I think her name is. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. So she is one of the Lilum. So she's one of the 3 main witches who's after the heart of the star. Now, she does that so that her and her sisters can regain their youth. Because you eat the star, you regain the youth. And so in the book, it's described they've lived many youths. Many youths. I can barely remember my one, but apparently they've had several. So she's very single-minded in what she's doing. She doesn't let herself be in the book. She doesn't let herself be sidetracked. She only uses her powers when she has to try and get the heart, the star. So she is very, that's what we need. That's what we're doing. In the film, she's a little bit more vain. She does use her magic to sort of like try and make herself prettier and younger, which then uses up the magic. So you do see that, which is a difference. Because I feel like in the book she's more just she wants the heart, whereas in the film she's also very vain of how she looks while she's doing it. So she gets thwarted twice in the capture of the star. But she's not malicious in the book, if you can believe that. She's after the heart of a star, but she's not malicious in the heart of a star. She does what she has to do. So when in the book someone tries to kill her, she just comes out and kills the guy and carries on. It's not revenge, it's not malicious, it's nothing like that. And when, as I said in the book, she realizes that heart no longer belongs to Yvain, she's given it to Tristan. She then turns around and says, right, okay, well, we'll get the next star that falls from the sky. You know, I wish we were able to get your heart, but we can't. That's where the big difference is with her character on film, because she captures Yvain sort of towards the end and is still intent on cutting her heart out, despite the fact that it's obvious that Yvain now feels for Tristan. So she's still sticking with it. She's still gonna get that heart. She doesn't, by the way. But yeah, so that's so in the book she doesn't. She sort of like leaves it. She leaves it and it's fine. And in the film it's her end basically when she starts chasing Yvain and takes it to the end. Then you come across Lady Una. Now, the reason I haven't done Dunstan Thorne, who's Tristan's dad, as a main character is because in the book, you see him at the start when when they conceive Tristan, and you see him sort of like as a person there. In the film, he's briefly shown at the beginning, gives him a candle, gets him across the wall, and then you see him again briefly at the end. Whereas Lady Una, who is Tristan's mum, is more prominent in both the book and the film. So she's a slave of Ditchwater Sal, and she's in the book, she's very fairy-like. So she's got cat ears, she's very slim, she's very pretty, she's got very dark raven hair. She's described as basically she got captured as a child, and when the terms of her agreement are up, she will no longer be a slave of Ditchwater Sal. Try saying that 10 times fast. But with that, in the book, it comes to its natural realization. In the film, Ditchwater Sal dies, which is why she's released from the contract. So apart from the fact that she's got fairy heritage and she's got the cat ears, they do keep her quite close. She helps out a bit more in the book than she does in the film. In the film, she sort of is around, but in the book you see her more interacting with characters. And then towards the end, which I think is the big difference of the characteristics, is Lady Una is finally free, she's happy that she's got her son back, and she basically orders him to go back and be the Lord. Tristan's not ready for that yet. As I said, I think he's like 17, he's 17 years old, he doesn't want to rule a country, he's just fallen in love. So she is important, and so she goes, right, I'm going back in this big carriage and everything like that. And he goes, right, you go back and rule in my place until I come back. And that's, in the book, she goes back and she rules, and then Tristan eventually turns up, takes over the ruling, and goes away, and everyone's happy. In the film, he takes over straight away, and she sort of like steps to the sidelines, so she's not really as strong of a character towards the end. She's just there as a plot point, really, rather like to say that this is why he's the next Lord of Stormhold. And she sort of like helps save Tristan and Yvain from the witches, but she's not as strong of a character within herself. So next you come across Ditchwater Sal. Now she's Lady Una's captor, as I said, and she's a witch, and you see her interact with Lamia. Again, I apologise if that's incorrectly said. Now she's shown as being greedy, she's always out for herself, she's very crafty and manipulative in everything that she does. And this shows really well on the screen as well. So they've got her pretty much spot on. The major difference that, again, with that character is that in the book she survives, she just loses her slave. In the film, she gets beheaded by Lamia because she crosses Lamia for the last time. So then you've got Victoria. Now, Victoria Forrester, I feel, is done an injustice in the film. In the book, she's kind but aloof. She's aware that she's a pretty girl, but she does feel love, because you find out that she's actually in love with somebody else, and she's crying when Tristan comes back because she never thought that he would do it. And she felt guilty for sending him out in the first place, because again, she never thought he'd do it. So she is only 18. She's basically just a teenager. And if you can remember yourself being anything other than a little bit aloof, and depending on how pretty you were or how handsome you were, I can guarantee you knew that as well. So she's always true to her word as well, because as I said, she wanted to marry somebody else, but when Tristan comes back in the book, she full on turns around and goes, I promised you whatever you wanted, I will marry you if that's what you want. But that's not what she wants, but she's willing to do that because that's what she agreed to. Yeah, in the film, as I said, it was a bit of an injustice. They turned her into sort of like a vindictive, petty character. So she sort of like pits him against other people. When he comes back, she was just like, oh, I never thought you'd make it, basically. And then he bests the person that she's now gonna marry, and he goes, "No, it's fine. You're petty. You're only looks, really. You're nothing else." And I feel that's a bit cruel, because that's not who she is. She's the plot to get him across the wall, but she is a decent human being, and she's not as manipulative as they show her in the film. And so I do feel for her, I really do. So then you've got the two brothers. Now, the two brothers that are left are the ones that are trying to kill each other off, basically, for the Lord of Stormhold, because the last man standing is the one that's going to survive. Now, I come from a family of 8 siblings. If I got told I had to kill everybody else off so that I could be the ruling heir of Stormhold, don't know if I'd do it, to be perfectly honest. Sorry sisters, sorry brothers, love you to bits. I can't tell you what'll happen. But they have to kill each other off. There can only be one person left. Now, in the film, there's 3 left, and then there's 2 left, and in the book again there's 3, and then there's 2. And then in the book and the film, one of them gets slit in the throat by Lamia, and then the brother that's left is like, right, before I go and become the final ruler of Stormhold, I have to avenge the brother. So in the book, he tries to burn her out of her house, and she kills him with a snake. In the film, he's used as sort of like in the final act, and he goes and he tries to confront this woman, gets drowned, and then uses a puppet to fight Tristan when he comes through the door. So it's sort of like, I mean, within the characters as well, you have got the dead brother ghosts. In the film, they're there right until the end, until they realise who's in charge. And when Tristan gets hold of the Ruby of Stormhold, they disappear. In the book, they disappear when they realise that actually all of them are dead and there's no one left. So they go, right, we're off, see you later. And then I'm going to briefly mention the unicorn. Now, the unicorn, I know, is not like a character as such, but I do love the fact that in the book, the unicorn is fighting a lion, they save it, and then the unicorn then saves, in turn, both Yvain and Tristan. And it happens like that in the film and the book. In the film, they don't save the unicorn just comes naturally. But you sort of like, I love the idea of that unicorn being there in both. So that's what I thought I'd briefly mention it. Now, there is a huge amount of characters in the book and both the film, as I said before, and I can't mention everybody. But for those that are portrayed to the big screen, apart from Victoria, and apart from the last bit of Lady Una, they are pretty much, well, and I suppose the last bit of Lamia as well. They are shown their key points and their key essences. But because the differences that are there are quite noticeable differences, I think I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 for the character representation. So then next we delve into setting. Now, the time period is set in like the 19th century, and the place that it features is both this sort of like fairyland and fairy village, and also this village of Wall. And it's exactly the same in the book, in the film as well. In the book, they go sort of all over and they experience more of the fairy village. In the film they don't, but that's not too much of a problem. They do stick to primarily the time period that it was set in, sort of like what would have been going on at the time, and they stick to those two places. They don't really take you anywhere else. And because I've got a sense that the director is keeping it exactly the same pretty much, I'm going to give the setting a 10 out of 10 there. So now we come to the plot. Now the plot is always the biggest part, and I always try and condense it as much as I can. So if I'm missing any key points, or if there is anything that you think that I rushed over, do comment below and I will try and get back to you. So I'm going to do it slightly differently now. I'm going to do similarities and then I'm going to quote differences, and I'm going to see how this works. So similarities, you've got both narratives have a similar story to them. So you've got boy meets foreign lady, so that's Dunstan meets Lady Una. They fall in love, a child is born, that child is then raised in the village of Wall, that child then falls in love with Victoria, gets sent over the wall, tries to find the star, finds the star, brings back the star, but as he's bringing back the star, he falls in love. He meets pirates along the way, he meets witches, he meets the Lords of Stormhold, he meets all sorts of interesting characters and creatures. You also have the Lords of Stormhold that are killing each other off as well. And the basic adventures are in the same way in the book and the film. They both tell the same sort of story. It also includes the narrative of Ditchwater Sal transporting Tristan as a little dormouse, which I think is adorable, because if you're like me, you always read the terms and conditions in a contract, and you always make sure that you are getting the best that you can. And all he said was, I want to be dropped off exactly the same way that I got picked up, and I want to be given food and accommodation on the way. So she turns him into a dormouse, turns him back to a human on the other end. She hasn't broken anything, and he's fine. So he does. I love that little bit there. And it does end with Yvain and Tristan falling in love and getting married. As during their journey to the wall, they encounter it in that hole's a witch. A unicorn saves them. They end up in the sky. They end up going with the sky pirates. And it helps them to truly fall for each other. Now, the differences in this are very big. So, first of all, in the film, I apologise about that, didn't mean to kick it. So in the book, it starts with Dunstan, and it starts with Dunstan going across to the fairy market that comes to the village of Wall once every 9 years, meeting the fairy woman, having a child with the fairy woman, but then goes back to the village, and Dunstan then marries the village girl that he was courting before this all happens. Now, 9 months later, the little boy gets dropped off. But in the book, Tristan has a little sister and is 17 years of age, but also has a stepmom. Whereas in the film, he's an only child, and you don't really see a mum at all. You just see the dad. So also the way that Tristan gets over the wall as well. In the film, he tries to go over unsuccessfully. Then he gets given a Babylon candle, which you light it and wish where you want to be, and it'll take you straight there. In the book, however, Dunstan takes his son to the wall and goes, he's going back to where he came from. You know where he's from. You know what he is. Let him pass. And they do. So it's really nice and easy and really simple. So they do give him the Babylon candle in the film, which takes him straight to the crater, straight to Yvain. And I think this is a way of cutting off some time, really, of the plot, which is why they've sort of had him go straight there. Rather in the book, he meets a little hairy man. It's never said what race he is, if he's a dwarf, if he's a gnome, and it just says it's described as a little hairy man, basically. So he meets up with this little hairy man that knew Dunstan from all those years ago and appreciates that Dunstan's been good to him in the past. So then they're travelling together, they sort of end up looking after each other, and then they end up in carnivorous woods. Now, in the book, Tristan has this sort of like underlying idea of where he is at all points and where everything else is and how long it is to a certain place and how far away the star is and where exactly they are and where the hidden path is and everything. I mean, I wish I knew that, because my sense of direction is appalling. In the film, it's not shown as much because, as I said, he goes straight to the star. So because Tristan saves them from the carnivorous woods and him and the little hairy man almost dying, the little hairy man then finds a Babylon candle, which is sort of like half used, and says, right, you go get the star, you come back, I'll be waiting for you here. So Tristan uses the candle, walks to the star, the candle sputters out, so he knows he can't go back. He finds the star crying in a crater, and then wraps the chain around her to make her become a slave, and basically makes her travel and tries to realise that it's going to take him quite a long time to get back. So in the... Right, let's have a look. So in the book as well, you sort of like once he's found the star, they then go on their travels and they meet loads of other people. They go at one point as well to a clearing where, as I mentioned earlier, the unicorn and the lion are fighting over a crown. He realizes he saves the unicorn's life, puts the crown on the lion, and because of that, the unicorn then helps carry Yvain, so that the journey's a little bit quicker. In the book, they sort of like, the way the unicorn finds her is she sat crying tied to a tree. The unicorn comes and releases her and then goes off while Tristan's looking for food and drink. So it is, you've got those differences. Now, in regards to the basic adventure, as I said before, it is sort of the same. The one thing that I found was strange that they changed was the actual pirates that you meet. So sort of like the adventure to the inn, the fact that in the inn Tristan saves Yvain's life, they end up in the clouds, and in the clouds they meet the sky pirates that bottle electricity basically and sell it. Now in the book, they're just understanding, welcome them on board, have fun, to just basically look after them, and they're sort of like a really nice, happy crew. Whereas in the film, for some unknown reason, the captain pretends to throw them both overboard, then brings them on board, and then teaches Tristan how to be a man, teaches Yvain how to be a woman. At one point as well, the captain's a cross-dresser. He calls himself Shakespeare because apparently Shakespeare is like a double meaning, so everybody thinks it strikes fear into the hearts, but he knows he's a famous poet. It's a bit strange. I don't know why they quite changed those characters and why they changed those interactions. I thoroughly enjoyed both in the book and the film. Don't get me wrong, I did. It just felt like there was no reason for it, basically. So you've got the fact that he gets taught how to be a man from this sky pirate, whereas in the book it's just him traveling and him becoming more world weary, as it were, that teaches him how to become a man. So Tristan then travels back. They manage to make it back to the wall, just as the fairy market was going on in the book, and he goes back through the wall in the book, and his sister's waiting and goes, "Oh my God, we thought you were dead. We thought you were lost." He basically says what's happened. Everything's okay. He appreciates his mum, his stepmom as well, because he realizes that it's his stepmom, not his real mum. And it is love. And then, as I said before about the Victoria thing, she's in tears because she realizes she's going to have to stick to what she promised. He then promises that they'll get married the next day and leaves it to it. And it's a happy sort of like little end. And then he goes, right, I'm staying at the wall. I'm staying with Yvain. In the film, I understand why they did it. Again, it's for dramatic effect, basically. He leaves her in an inn, doesn't tell her what she's doing, cuts a bit of her hair and goes through the wall. Finds Victoria, brings back, realises that it's gone to dust, the bit of hair, and it's not actually hair anymore, so realises what will happen if she comes through the wall. Fights off the guy. Victoria goes, "Oh, he's such a handsome hero now." He goes, "You're shallow," and goes back across the wall, and realises that realises that Yvain has been captured by Lamia. And it's sort of like it's a more action-packed in the film. In the book, it's just a nice sort of like, this is what it is, and in the film, it's sort of like, this is the penultimate part of the story. So he then goes running off after Yvain, and then finds out as well that he's ironically running after his mom as well in the film. And then in the film, he fights the witches, he fights the dead Lord of Stormhold, wins the heart of Yvain, and then they go back and they rule. Now they rule happily ever after together, and because she's given him his heart, they have children, grandchildren, but he never ages because he has her heart. The heart of a star is immortal. So he's a kind and just ruler, and then when they're ready to go, they light a Babylon candle and go up to the sky together. In the book, the ending is different. So, as I said before about the witch, realizing that the heart no longer belongs to her, then you go off and realize that in actuality, the mum is now the Lady of Stormhold. She goes off and rules. Tristan and Yvain go on a nice little adventure together. When they're finally ready to rule, they come back. When they're ruling together, Tristan passes on his own of old age. They can't have kids and don't have kids. But Yvain is left in charge, and she becomes a really lovely Lady of Stormhold and rules for essentially eternity. We don't get told when her rule ends. So I completely understand why the film did what it was, to have it work and be more of an adventure film. So they did add the final confrontation, and they did add a few little bits and cut out a few characters that they thought maybe were surplus to necessity. So I do understand that, but yet due to the fact that the plot is missing quite a few points that read well in the book, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Now, in regards to if the film stands on its own right, I adore the film. I watched the film before I read the book. I read the book and I loved the book and I loved the film, and they're both just beautiful stories. With the film, I can actually watch that 100 times over and again not be bothered. And I can watch it with whoever I want, whenever I want. And even though I've read the book and I watched the film afterwards, I still put a bit of the book to the back of my mind and go, it's fine. I know that's not what happened. And it's not often that I do that, I'm just going to say, but I did. So I think I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. The film does stand in its own right. And you don't have to have read the book. You can just watch the film, and it is a good adventure story and it's a good love story. And I do enjoy it. So overall, looking at all the points I've made earlier, how does the book get transcribed to the film? Now, as I mentioned, there's less conflict between the main characters. There is still some, but there's less. And the fact that some of the characters don't even make it to the film, I would love to see the little hairy man on the film. And the carnivorous woods as well. That would have been quite fun. I believe the film took the idea of the story, the basic makings of the story, and completely put its own slant on it. To make it more of an adventure film rather than just a nice little fairy story, as it were. So, due to there being a lot of differences from the characters to the plot, the setting was spot on, but there were such big differences. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. I will still read the book and I will still watch the film in their own rights, but overall I will give it a 4 out of 10. Now, of course, as I said, and I always say, these are only my opinions. If you disagree or agree, or if you want me to have a look at something else as well, compare a book and film that you quite enjoy, leave it below in the comments. Please do subscribe to my channel so you can be notified when there's new videos available. But I am getting one out every Wednesday. And next Wednesday's adaptation is Carrie. So that is next Wednesday's adaptation. But until then, don't forget to always keep it contented. Thank you.